Hi, welcome to my book review. So, the book that I selected to read is called Shackled, A Tale of Wronged Kids, Rogue Judges, and a Town That Looked Away. The author is Candy J. Cooper. And so, this book was published in 2024, and it was a finalist in the Excellence in Young Adult Nonfiction. This book I was able to read as an ebook on Sora. So for those of you that have school access, you and your students will be able to access this book through Sora. And it made it really easy to read and accessible because I was able to read the book either on my computer or on my phone. So moving on to the summary. So if you enjoy a book that has true information, that has a little bit of crime, and talks about injustices, then this is definitely a book that I would recommend to you. It took place in the early 2000s in Pennsylvania, and without giving away too much, it is about two judges that abused their status in the legal system, and they would have young children in their courthouse, and instead of giving them a lighter sentence for their low-level crimes, they immediately sent them to detention centers. And the reason for this is because the two judges were profiting and making money for every child that they were putting into the detention center. They had connections with developers and other people in these detention centers. So for them, if they were able to fill up the detention centers, then they were giving a payback later on. And again, this is a true story, so it is known as the Kids for Cash scandal. So in case you want to look that up later for more information, there is a documentary also on this. And the shocking thing is that this affected more than 2,500 children. And so I think that in itself is just a great book to read because it's something that hopefully won't be repeated again. And while reading the book, I know I talked about how it was also created into a documentary, and other authors have written books about this Kids for Cash scandal, but I really did appreciate the way that the author Cooper took this topic and didn't just copy and paste it to something that was very similar that was already out there. She really did make it her own. Some literary qualities that stood out to me were the photographs that were included in the book. Yes, it is a nonfiction, but I was, as a reader, thankful that it wasn't heavy with photographs. It really did just select a few that were very powerful and meaningful. And so the book opens up the first chapter with an actual account from a child that was affected by this scandal. And it really ties you in as a reader and gets you kind of hooked and connected because you want to keep reading to find out what ended up happening to her. And there is a photograph of her. And so I think as a reader, that really just kind of gets you connected to the story right away to find out, okay, wow, what was the end result? And then there's also a photograph of the courthouse, because one of the things that they were emphasizing in the book was that this justice system and this courthouse let a lot of things kind of slip under the rug and just kind of like not really, things weren't paid attention to as much as they should have. And these two judges were able to get away with so much. So this courthouse is just a symbol in that community that really stands out. And then there was another photograph included that was actually used in one of the newspaper coverages from a journalist, and it shows a parent that had a child that was affected by this scandal, and the parent is yelling at one of the judges in front of the courthouse. And that photo just really, without even giving all the details about the photo, that right there, just as the reader, it helps you understand how serious and how much this affected so many families and so many people in that community. So the photographs were a really great part of the book that the author included. And then I did include a picture of the chapters here on the left side. I like how the author, Cooper, included them in bold because they really do stand out for a reason. And when you read those titles, some of the words stand out. And the ones that stand out the most to me are just greed. That one kind of exemplifies what the whole scandal was about, how these judges kept this situation going on even though they knew it was wrong. But for them, it was about the money. It wasn't about the children and what they needed. And then the other ones were just unimaginable, right? That's something that when you read the story, it's really hard to think like, wow, this is true. You have to keep reminding yourselves that this actually really did happen. And then the last one that stood out to me was the word branded. What the author does in the story kind of helps me move on to my next literary quality is the point of view. What Cooper does differently in this book than other authors have done about this scandal is that she really does take the point of view of the children for the story. Yes, it provides facts and information about the whole scandal and about the town and how they were all affected, but she takes the time to really focus on individual children and tell us their story. And the last thing that stood out to me as a literary quality was that there was factual information included, but as a reader, and I'm thinking about kids that are going to read this book too, I wasn't overwhelmed with too many facts to where I was discouraged to read. I think what helped about that is at the end of the book, there's a section called Author's Notes, and Cooper really goes into details talking about how she immersed herself in this project. She didn't just take already researched information and throw it in a book. She took the time to reach out to kids that had been affected by this. And this is 20 years after the scandal, and she's asking them these questions to really see how it started and then how it's affected their life thus far. So I think that really makes this story have such great quality and makes it different from others. And then why would a library select this book? I know it's not all about just awards or recognitions, but here's a list of all the recognitions that this book has received. And I think that just goes to show how great of a book it is. And so nonfiction, first of all, it's hard to always find a good book that kids are going to like that are nonfiction. And I think this is one that they're really going to connect with. It's a great book for social studies, depending on grade levels. You could tie it into different lessons. It's a great book for reluctant readers, and also I read it as an ebook. So even if it's a hard copy or if it's a digital copy, this wasn't a story where I was consumed with too many facts that I had to remember. It does that real life connection, so it helps you as a reader kind of follow along with the storyline. And then besides just the recognitions as a librarian, I feel like this is a current, right? This happened in early 2000s. It was published in 2024. So it's a relevant topic, and it's something that I feel like young adults, young kids, they're going to know things about the legal system, and so it could really spark some great discussions on their opinion of what they think. And then just for classroom use, it could be a great social studies connection. Instead of having just to read a textbook, this might be a great way to tie in some type of content. And then why might I recommend this book to a student? I think that kids would really appreciate how this story takes into account the kids that were affected by the scandal and puts their story out there and highlights the fact that this was not right, that this was not something that was okay. And so it's going to right away give that opportunity for the kids to have an opinion, to have discussions about what they think is right and wrong, socially, what maybe they've experienced, and also just vocabulary too on, there's that word restorative justice. What does that mean? What does that look like? And so I think that kids will really appreciate how it's a true story, and they'll be able to relate to it as well. And then here are my references. Thank you for listening.